This week, we're learning the Sikha of Shabbos Parshas Bolok, which was Shiva Asar B'Tammuz Yud Zayin Toiv Tammuz of the year Tov Nun Aleph. The Sikha could be found in Sefer HaSichas Tov Aleph, page 683. The Rebbe starts off by the Farbrengen by saying that the special inyan of the Shabbos in which Shiva Asar B'Tammuz falls out, the fast is pushed off, of course, to Sunday. We could explain the special quality of this Shabbos in two ways. The first and simple way is, since Shabbos is a day when one is not allowed to fast, especially a fast that's associated with negative things, days in which you didn't fast because of the sorrows, because of the troubles that happen in those days, Shabbos is a day we're not allowed to be sad. Furthermore, Shabbos is a day in which one needs to be happy. As it says on the pasuk, "V'yom simchaschem," on the day of your rejoicing. Chazal tell us this refers to Shabbos. It's a day of tainug, of pleasure, of delight, as the pasuk says, "V'karaso l'Shabbos oineg," and therefore the fast is being pushed off from Shabbos to Sunday to the day after Shabbos. So that's the simple way of looking at it. You can't fast on Shabbos, so the fast is pushed off to Sunday. It says the Rebbe, on a deeper level, we could explain that the fact that we push off the tainus, the fast from Shabbos, is not only a technical thing, moving it from one day to another, but mainly this is already giving the koyach. This is already giving us the special opportunity that eventually we should be able to push off the fast completely. This is sort of a beginning of that. And as we find in a Gemara that discusses a story with a specific Tisha B'Av that had fallen out on Shabbos, it was pushed off to Sunday, and Rebbe was of the opinion, since the fast was pushed off, let it be pushed off completely. In other words, we shouldn't have to fast at all. Especially so, this would be concerning Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, which is not as serious and severe as Tisha B'Av, as strict as Tisha B'Av, because in fact the Gemara says that Me'ikar Adin, in other words, according to the original, by the letter of the law, if it's a situation where there's no decrees and persecution against the Yidden, although it's not a time when we have the Beis HaMikdash, there is a savara in the Gemara to say, there is some thought to say that if one wants, one could fast, and if one doesn't want, doesn't even have to fast. That's regarding the other fasts, besides for Tisha B'Av, of course, in a day that many tsaros had happened, and tragedy has struck twice on that day. So a day like Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, if even Tisha B'Av there's a svara to say that it should be pushed off completely, how much more so Shiva Asar B'Tammuz? So when the fast is being pushed off from Shabbos to Sunday, this is sort of a beginning to that stage when it will be pushed off completely. And of course, ultimately in the times of Yemei HaMashiach, as the Rambam tells us, that all of these fasts are going to become nullified when Mashiach comes. And furthermore, as the Rambam says, not only that, but they're actually going to be transformed into Yomim Tovim, into days of happiness and rejoicing. As the pasuk says, Koyomar Hashem Tzvois, this is what Hashem says, Tzoyim HaRevi, the fast of the fourth month, which is Tammuz, the fast of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, as well as the other fasts will be transformed for the Yidden, for days of joy and happiness, Yomim Tovim. And as the pasuk concludes, you should love emes, truth and peace. So, in other words, what the Rebbe is saying is that there's two ways of looking at the Shabbos. Is it just merely that we're moving the fast from Shabbos to Sunday, or is it already a beginning for that ultimate pushing off when the fast will be transformed into a Yom Tov? Says the Rebbe, V'yesh loymar, that similar to this idea, that the fast becomes transformed into a Yom Tov, which is going to happen when Mashiach comes, on a certain level, that's what's happening when the fast falls out on Shabbos. That not only are we saying that we don't fast, as an option number one that we said, but rather, like the option number two was in fact that we're saying that this is representing a day of Yom Tov. In other words, we're taking the day of Shabbos. Not only are we not fasting, but it's actually a day of rejoicing, pleasure, and delight. Or to put it a little bit different in different words, the connection between the fast and the Shabbos, we can look at it in two ways. Either it's only about negating the negative in Yonim of the fast, so we cannot fast on Shabbos, so we push it off to the following day, to Sunday. Or are we more focusing on the positive aspect of the fast? The positive aspects of a fast, which we'll soon explain what that is, actually do apply on Shabbos, and even in a stronger measure than during the week. The fact that it is transformed to Sasein Ula Simcha, as all of this will be explained soon. So the Rebbe explains in Seif Beis. When we look at a fast, of course on the external level, it seems like a very, very negative thing. We're fasting. Fasting is the opposite of enjoyment, of pleasure. But deep down inside the Pnimius, the fast is really a good thing. As the Pasuk speaks about a fast, says, Yom Ratzoin LaHashem, it is a desirable day and an auspicious day for Hashem. More specifically, regarding the fast of the 4th month, the month of Tammuz, the fast of Shivasar B'Tammuz, which is actually the first of the 4 fasts that are mentioned in this Pasuk in Nevi'im, when it speaks about the fast of the 4th month, which is Shivasar B'Tammuz, the fast of the 5th month, which is Tisha B'Av, the fast of the 7th month, which is Tzom Gedalia, and the fast of the 10th month, which is Asara B'Teves. So this one is the first in the listing of the fasts. So B'chitzonius, on the external level, it's a day that's associated with destruction, with the Churban and with the Galus. But B'pnimius, inside, it really represents something good. In fact, this is hinted by the fact that the fast comes out on the 17th day. Shivasar, of course, is the gematria of Toiv is 17. And of course, the ultimate Toiv is by Ge'ulo HaMitis V'Ashleima. And how is this all to do with the fast? Because of course we understand that the whole purpose, the kavan of the whole idea of Churban and Galus is only in order to bring about the greater perfection of the Ge'ulo HaMitis V'Ashleima. In other words, the external of it is the Galus. But the Pnimius of all of this is all about the inyan of the Ge'ulah. Says the Rebbe, based on this we could explain the following Gemara. The Gemara discussing this pasuk, Tzoim HaRevi, all these fasts will be transformed for the Yidden, L'Sasein, L'Simcha, etc. The Gemara says it seems to be 2 opposite things in the pasuk. On the one hand, the pasuk refers to it as Tzoim HaRevi, days of fasts, and then the pasuk speaks about that it's days of Sasein and Simcha. And the Gemara says, in a time when there is peace and things are good for the Yidden, then it's Sasein and Simcha, then it's times of happiness and rejoicing. If it's times of problems for the Yidden, then it's a time for fasting. But the Rebbe asks, seemingly, l'chayra, how could you say that a certain day is called with exact opposite names? Tzoim, a day of fasting, and at the same time you're also calling it a day for Sasein v'Simcha. So if we just explain it regularly, so we still have a little bit of a problem, how could you mamish refer to the same day with these 2 opposites? But since the way we just explained it, that really even the fasting itself, the whole purpose of the fast, is that it should be transformed to a day of Sasein v'Simcha, which comes through and after the Galus. It's just that in the time of Galus, what's mainly emphasized is the fasting aspect. When there's no peace, when there's problems, then it's a day of fast. By the Ge'ulah, it's going to be revealed what it was really all about, a day for rejoicing and happiness. And that's what the Gemara means when it says Bizman sheyesh shalom, when things are going well for the Yidden, it's a day of Sasein v'Simcha. So now we can understand how the very same day is called with both names, meaning to say it's not only in 2 different times, but really the Pnimius of the fasting itself is really all about Sasein and Simcha. Says the Rebbe in Seif Gimel, just like the way it's going to be when Mashiach comes, in a miniature way, and similar to this is already when the fast falls out on Shabbos. Since Shabbos is also called a Yom Ratzin, a day desirable by Hashem, an auspicious day, or as we say in davening, Chem Das Yomim Oisei Karasa, it's a day specially called as a special favored treasure by Hashem. In fact, Shabbos is also connected to the Ge'ulah, as emphasized in the Shir Shel Yom. When we say Mizmer Shir L'Yom HaShabbos, the Gemara explains what do we mean by Mizmer Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. This is a song for the ultimate and greatest Shabbos when Mashiach comes. That's what the Yom HaShabbos really represents. Every Shabbos represents the Yom Shekuloi Shabbos, the time of Mashiach. So therefore, when a fast falls out on Shabbos, when we say that you cannot fast, because fasting is to do with Churban and Galus, with the destruction and the Galus, what do we then emphasize? We only look at the positive aspect of the fast, the idea of the Sasein and the Simcha that's connected to the Geula. Says the Rebbe, this is specifically emphasized by the eating and drinking that we do on Shabbos. When the fast falls out on Shabbos, we're still eating and drinking. In fact, it's a mitzvah to have delight with food and drink. As the halacha tells us, dogim gdoilim, big fish, and meat, and wine. fatty foods and spicy drinks, basar sham and fatty meat and old aged wine, that all emphasizes that not only are we negating the fast, so technically we're eating and drinking even though we should have been fasting, so it's not only about negating the negative things of the fast, but rather what's mainly emphasized is the simcha, the tainug, the enjoyment, the pleasure that we have in eating the fatty meat and drinking the aged wine. And the Rebbe in fact says over here that perhaps on a day of a fast that falls out on Shabbos, we actually need to add in our eating and drinking and rejoicing even more than a regular Shabbos. So there shouldn't even be a thought that maybe we're not eating properly because of the fast. We actually need to increase in our joy and happiness in the eating and drinking. So in other words, when the fast falls out on Shabbos, what we're mainly noticing, what we're mainly seeing is the way the fast has been transformed into a day of sasin v'simcha. Says the Rebbe V'yesh Shlomo, we could say that when one is eating the big fish and the fatty meat and the aged wine on Seudas Shabbos, a day which would have been a fast, and as we just mentioned, perhaps you have to have even more on such a Shabbos than a regular Shabbos, this is also hinting to the Seudah that the Eibishter is going to make to the tzaddikim. And of course, V'amech kulam tzaddikim, this refers to all Yidden that are tzaddikim. La'asid lavoy, in which we are going to have the meat from the Levyasan and from the Shoir Habar, and we're going to have from that special preserved wine, the Yayin HaMeshumor. So in addition to all of the spiritual things that are hinted in the Seudah, which I explained in Chassidus, there's of course also going to be the Gashmi is the Seudah, as it is known, that the shleimus of the reward of Yemois HaMashiach, when there will be no longer any fast and it will all be transformed into Yom Tovim, is not in Gan Eden, a place where there's no food and drink, similar to a fast day. Rather, the ultimate is in Olam HaTchiyah, in the time of Tchiyas HaMesim, which is that's what's usually called Olam Haba, when the neshamas are going to be in physical bodies, and in fact the neshama is even going to be sustained from the guf, as explained in Chassidus. And especially that from Shabbos we go straight into Motzei Shabbos when they have Dvar Malchus. And since it's connected to the honor of Shabbos, we need to accompany the Shabbos when it leaves. Shabbos when it leaves in an honorable way, just like when it enters. So the Rebbe says we should be very particular and careful about it. Also on the Motzei Shabbos of Shivasar B'Tammuz. And again the Rebbe says perhaps maybe even more than a regular Motzei Shabbos. And what's the idea of Dvar Malchus? Dvar Malchus is called the Seudas of the David Malka Mashiach. In other words, this emphasizes even more the special connection to Yemois HaMashiach, the time when all fasts will be nullified and will be transformed to days of happiness and joy and Yomim Tovim. Says the Rebbe in Seif Dalet, we could connect all of this, that is, the fact that the fast is being pushed off and being transformed into a day of Yom Tov and Sasin v'Simcha when Mashiach comes, we could connect this whole idea with the Parshas HaShavua, which is Parshas Bolok. One of the special things, of course, in Parshas Bolok, especially in the part of the Parsha that's Shaykh to Shabbos, the Chitas of Shabbos, that's the place where Torah clearly discusses the coming of Mashiach. As the Rambam paskins and says, HaMelech HaMashiach. Regarding the King Mashiach, the Torah has already testified about him in the Parsha that discusses the story with Bilam. And there, it actually testifies about two people that are called Mashiach. The first one, that's David HaMelech, that saved the Yidden from their oppressors at that time. And then Mashiach, that's going to stand up from his children, that's going to save the Yidden at the end of the Golus. And the Rambam goes ahead and quotes the psukim of our Parsha. Erenu v'lo yata, a pasuk that says, I see him but not now, is referring to David. Ashurenu v'lo karev, I could see him but not so close, that's referring to Mashiach. And in this way he goes through all the psukim. He says, Dorach koichav mi Yaakov, a star steps out of Yaakov, refers to David. The Kamshevet mi Yisrael, a ruler coming out from Yisrael, refers to Mashiach. Similarly, the further psukim. Umochatz pasei Moav, he's going to destroy and crush the sides of Moav, refers to David. The Karka Kol Bnei Sheis, ruling over all the people of Sheis, refers to Mashiach. V'hoya Edom Yereisha, that David, he's going to conquer Edom, and then V'hoya Yereisha V'goyim, the HaMelech HaMashiach, HaMashiach is going to conquer the whole world, etc. So in Parshas Bolok, we see many of these psukim that are nevuos about Mashiach. Says the Rebbe, the fact that where is the Torah testifying about Mashiach is all in the Parsha that discusses the story of Bilam. What's the story of Bilam? As the pasuk says, Hashem didn't want to listen to Bilam. He transformed the curses into blessings. This hints to the exact point that we were speaking about before, transforming the Golus into the Geula, transforming days of fast days into days of Yomim Tovim. So this is the connection to Parshas Bolok, the same idea, like the fast being transformed, that's the whole Nakuda of this Parsha, curses being transformed into the ultimate brachis, the brachis of the Geula. Says the Rebbe in a similar way, the Parsha that we're about to start reading on Shabbos by Mincha, Parshas Pinchas. So first of all, we have right away the connection again to the Geula. We know Pinchas is Eliyahu, the one who is going to give us the news of the Geula. But more specifically, when we look at the details and the content of the Parsha. First of all, we have the counting of Bnei Yisrael. The Pasuk says, Su'uas Reish Kol Hadas Bnei Yisrael, count all the Yidden, those that are 20 years old and over. So that's immediately also connected to the Geula when we're going to have the 10th counting of the Yidden, as the Medrash says, that 10 times the Yidden were counted, 9 of them previously, and the 10th one, La'asid Lavoi, as the Pasuk says, that the sheep, the Yidden, are going to be pass over the one counting them, either Mashiach or the Eibishter himself. So that's number one connection to Mashiach in our Parsha. We then also have in Parshas Pinchas about Eretz Yisrael being divided, as the Pasuk says, this is the way Eretz Yisrael should be divided to a bigger Shevet, that's a bigger portion, etc. Has to be divided through a Goyrel. Now, says the Rebbe, since the only thing that's discussed is the division of the land, but it doesn't actually get into the details of how the land is divided to 12 Shvatim, as is mentioned and discussed in the following Parshas Matis and Masei, says the Rebbe that really when this Parsha is discussing the division of the land, it's also including the way the land is going to be divided when Mashiach comes, which then it's going to be a land not only of 7 nations, a land of 10 nations, and not only divided to 12 Shvatim, but also divided to 13 Shvatim, that is including Shevet Levi. So here again, we have a hint to Yemois HaMashiach in the Parsha. Finally, says the Rebbe, another thing in the Parsha, we also have the Karbonos of the Yomim Tovim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, after first discussing also the Karbonos of every day, the Karban Tamid, and of Shabbos, which gets a double carbon. So here again, we have the hint of transforming all the negative things, the fast days, but what are they going to be transformed to? Into Yomim Tovim. That's what the Parsha speaks about, the idea of the Yomim Tovim. Of course, the Yomim Tovim, when Mashiach is going to come, is going to be greater than the Yomim Tovim of nowadays, because it says that actually the Yomim Tovim nowadays are going to be nullified like a candle in the daylight compared to the Giluyim of Yemois HaMashiach, and especially compared to the Yomim Tovim, the new Yomim Tovim that we're going to have when Mashiach comes. Says the Rebbe in the brackets, via Shloimar, that the fasts that are going to be transformed into Yomim Tovim are going to be even greater Yomim Tovim than Purim. What's unique about Purim? When we say that all the Yomim Tovim are going to be nullified, we say besides for Purim. The Pasuk says, V'meya Purim o'elu, the days of Purim won't pass from the Yidden, we won't stop remembering the days of Purim. But the Rebbe says, here we're going to have the fasts that are going to be transformed into Yom Tovim are going to be greater than that even. Because regarding Purim, we only say it's not going to be bottled, it won't be nullified. But in comparison to the Giluyim of Yemois HaMashiach, which are greater than Purim, so we're saying, it'll still the idea of Purim will still be noticeable. But surely the Yom Tovim that are going to come about in the times of Mashiach surely will be even greater than a day such as Purim. Says the Rebbe in Seif Hey, we could add and explain the special quality of the Shabbos in which Shivasar B'Tammuz falls out, which is the beginning of Yemei Bein HaMtzorim, the beginning of the 3 weeks. And so too the Shabbos with Tisha B'Av falls out, the end of the 3 weeks. So to explain the special advantage of these Shabbosim compared to the other Shabbosim that are during and inside the 3 weeks. The Rebbe says it is known. It's explained in Chassidus that the 3 weeks of the Bein HaMitzorim are similar, just like in space. We have something called a midbar, a desert. So in time we have, throughout the year, it's the 3 weeks, are like the desert within time. We also know a rule that the Eibishter brings a cure before the Makkah. The Eibishter brings the refuah, that which could prevent and that which could help out the situation even before the problem occurs. So it says the Rebbe, the 3 Shabbosim, it says in Chassidus that the 3 Shabbosim within the 3 weeks, this is like the refuah for the 3 weeks. It's also explained in Chassidus that really every single Shabbos has 2 levels within it. Explained in many places in Chassidus. It's a higher level of Shabbos, a lower level of Shabbos. Every Shabbos is a double. So therefore, if you have 3 Shabbosim, really, if it's double, then it's really 6 Shabbosim. Now we have every Shabbos, and you also have the idea that every week has 7 days. So the 7 days of the week, each one of these 7 days of the week, inside these 7 days, is shining the Gilui of Shabbos. Says the Rebbe, this is what says in Chassidus, that through this we are subduing the midbar which has to do with the number 42. That is, just like the Yidden traveled in the desert 42 journeys. And it also represents the general idea of Golus going out of Eretz Yisrael is also compared to a midbar. So it's 42 journeys. When we have 7 times 6, or 7 illuminated by the 6 levels of Shabbos, shining in to the 7 days of the week, that equals 42. So the idea is that the Shabbos is illuminating, or lifting up, or giving the koyach to be mevader those 42, like the 42 journeys of the midbar, these 42 stages within the idea of Golus represented by the 3 weeks. Says the Rebbe, within this itself, we have a difference between the Shabbosim that are within the 3 weeks to the Shabbos that's before or the beginning of the 3 weeks, and so to the end of the 3 weeks. That is, most weeks the Shabbosim are just within the 3 weeks. So if that's the case, the 3 weeks actually start off in a sad way, with the days of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, so to speak, with a negativity. So what's mainly emphasized is the negative aspect of the Bein HaMetzorim, more the Churban and the Golus aspect. Then you see there's a problem. So it's emphasized that we need to fix it up. So you come along to a day of Shabbos within the 3 weeks, which represents Geula. So it's more like we started with a problem and then we get to the solution, we get to the Geula. Whereas the years, when Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the beginning of the 3 weeks, falls out on Shabbos, and so to Tisha B'Av, the end of the 3 weeks. So now what are we starting with? We're starting with a positive day. We're starting with a day of Shabbos. So what is the main focus? The main focus is not the negativity of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, but the toiv. We said Yud Zayin is begematria toiv. So we're more focused on the good, on the better aspects of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and of the 3 weeks. That is, that from the meitzar, from the distress, from the narrow place, that's all an introduction, and all includes the greatest merchav, the greatest expanse, the greatest perfection of the Geula HaMitis V'Ashleima, and that's why we start the 3 weeks and finish the 3 weeks with a day of Shabbos, a day of Geula. Or to put it in a little bit of other words, in the Shabbos, in the middle of the 3 weeks, like most years, what we're mainly focusing on in the Shabbos is we are negating the sadness, we're negating the problem, we're fixing the problem, we're fixing the Churban and the Golus. That's what Shabbos represents. Whereas when a Shabbos comes in the beginning, at the beginning and the end of the 3 weeks, like this year, here we're mainly focusing just on the positive aspect of the 3 weeks, not even feeling the Churban and the Golus, rather it's all about just preparing for the Geula. Says the Rebbe in Sivav Yesh Loimar, that this special quality of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, falling out on Shabbos, compared to the Shabbosim, the following Shabbosim, in the 3 weeks, is specifically emphasized and is even greater looking at Parshas Bolok. By prefacing first, the Rebbe says, the Parshi is that we read in the 3 Shabbosim, usually of the 3 weeks, and we know that the Yom Tovim or the fast and Tisha B'Av always has a connection to the Parsha when they're read. So the Parshas that are usually read in the 3 weeks are Matos, Masei, and Dvorim. When Matos, Masei are Mechuborim, are connected, then Pinchas is also in the 3 weeks. Whereas Parshas Bolok is never part of Bein HaMetzorim, never part of the 3 weeks. Because even when Parshas Bolok, like this year, is read on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, but then Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the fast, the negative aspect of the 3 weeks, is pushed off to the day after Shabbos, to Sunday, which is already Parshas Pinchas. If that's the case, we could see that there's a major difference between the Geula, the way it's in Parshas Pinchas, and again, Pinchas refers to Eliyahu Hanavi, to the way the Geula is in Parshas Bolok, which we mentioned before from the Rambam, that Parshas Bilam, Bolok, is the place where there's a hint both to David HaMelech and to Mashiach. That is, the Geula in Parshas Pinchas, since it's within the 3 weeks, that mainly emphasizes the idea that there is a Churban and a Golus, and it needs to be fixed up. Whereas the Geula, the way it's looked at and focused on in Parshas Bolok, is in a way that it's removed from the Bein HaMitzorim, from the Churban aspect. In other words, it's always before the 3 weeks. And therefore what's emphasized in this parsha is not so much a matter of fixing up a problem, fixing up the Golos, rather just looking at the Maila of the quality of the beauty of the Geula itself, pure Geula, even had there not been a Churban and a Golos. Just looking at the beautiful quality of the Geula. Says the Rebbe, this is specifically emphasized in the way the Torah tells us about Mashiach in this parsha. When the Rambam explains that the Torah testified about Mashiach, he starts off as follows. The pasuk says, "V'shav Hashem elekecha es shvuscha," that the Eibushter is going to bring back your captives. "V'richamecha," and have mercy on you. "V'shav kibetzcha," and bring you back and gather you, etc. Even if you disperse at the edges of the heaven, the Eibushter is going to bring you back. That's one pasuk, which is not in this parsha. Then the Rambam says, "Af b'parshas Bilam nemar v'sham niba b'shnei HaMashiachim." We have another pasuk in our parsha which speaks about these two people called Mashiach. What is the difference between these two psukim? In the pasuk v'shal Hashem elekecha shvuscha v'richamecha, etc., there it's mainly emphasizing a geula out of Golus. In other words, the Yidden are in captivity, etc. The Eibushter needs to bring them back. Whereas in Parshas Bilam, what's mainly the focus is just the Geula itself, the Malchus of David, which is called the Mashiach Rishon, and the way it comes out in its perfection in Mashiach HaAchrein, which comes from his children, even without a Golus. In the Parsha of Bilam, it doesn't speak about a situation of Golus. On the contrary, it speaks about freedom, it speaks about ruling over all the nations. Henam levadod yishkin v'agoyim lo yischashav, the Yidden are alone by themselves and not part of the rest of the Goyim. They are like a lion getting up, not lying down until they have their prey. How they're even greater than the other nations. V'yoreh me'agag malkoi v'sinasei malchusoi, the kingship of the Yidden, how great it is. And then the psukim about Mashiach, erenu v'lo yater, how I see him, etc., and how he's like a star coming out of Yaakov, and a ruler, etc. In other words, it keeps on speaking more and more qualities, advantages of the Yidden, and praise of the Yidden one after the other, without emphasizing that it's all coming out of a stage of Golus. Says the Rebbe, according to this we could also explain and make even more geschmack the reason why in this pasuk, in this parsha, it's also emphasizing the idea that Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. The pasuk says, "Keil moitziyom mitzrayim," and another pasuk, "Keil moitziyom mitzrayim." In the parsha where it speaks about Mashiach, why do we mention the idea of Yitzias Mitzrayim? This is similar to the pasuk, "Ki meitzeis chameyeretz Mitzrayim," and it implies that we're going to see wonders similar to the time of Yitzias Mitzrayim, which emphasizes that the Geula of Mashiach is not only because there's a need to get the Yidden out of Golus, the Golus that happened after Yitzias Mitzrayim, but rather there was a Geula of Mitzrayim, and now we're stepping up to even a higher level of Geula. We're going to miracles and wonders which are even greater than Mitzrayim, and that's true even if had there not been any Golus, we could still move up to a higher stage. So in other words, the emphasis over here is just purely how great the Geula is going to be, rather than focusing on the negativity of the Golus. The Rebbe says this is similar to what says in the continuation of the Parshas Bein HaMitzorim. It says in Parshas Masei, starts off, Eila Masei B'nei Yisrael, these are the journeys in plural of the Yidden that left Mitzrayim. So Chassidus explains to us that the going out of Mitzrayim is not only the one-time leaving from Ramses to Sukkos, but rather all of the journeys through the Midbar, all the way till Yarden, Yericho, till they come to the Yarden, which is next to Yericho, which is also a hint to the Gula Mitzvah V'Ashleima through Mashiach Tzidkenu, which it says about him, Moirach, from the word Yericho, which means literally he's going to take a sniff or a smell, V'Doin, and that's the way he's going to be able to paskin, just by smelling, just from giving a sniff, from giving a smell, he could paskin. That's what Yericho is a hint to. So in other words, all of the stages from Yetzias Mitzrayim all the way to the Geula is all part of one long process of leaving Mitzrayim in the greatest way. So in other words, the emphasis over here is just about having a better and more perfect Geula, even if not for the case of needing to fix a Churban and a Golus. Says the Rebbe in Siv Zayin, all of this has a special advantage even over other years, in which Shivasa B'Tammuz fell out of Shabbos Parshas Bolok. There's something unique and special in our generation. By first prefacing, just like we explained before, that in those years that Shivasa B'Tammuz falls out on Shabbos, what we're mainly looking and focusing on is on the good, on the toiv of Shivasa B'Tammuz and of the 3 weeks. We're not feeling the Churban and the Golus so much, it's rather more the focus is as how it's a preparation for Geula. because of the idea of Shabbos, which emphasizes Geula. So just like it's true on these Shabbosim, in a similar way, when we look at Klolus Hadoros over all generations, that the closer we get to the time of the Geula Amitis Vashleima, the less the emphasis on the feeling of Churban and Galus, the more the emphasis on the feeling as that we're preparing for the Geula, for the Toiv of Shivasar B'Tammuz and of the 3 weeks. Or to use the expression of the Gemara, when the Gemara says about the pasuk we mentioned before, that on the one hand you're calling it a fast day, on the other hand you're calling it a day of joy and happiness. So the Gemara said when it's a time of peace and good for Yidden, then it's joy and happiness. If there's trouble for the Yidden, then it's a fast. And then we quoted the Gemara before also that's saying that if it's neither Gzeiras HaMalchus, neither prosecution nor Shalom, peace, then it's sort of optional. You want your fast, you don't want you don't fast. There's such a svara in the Gemara. In other words, well, what do we see from this Gemara? That as the strength or as the severity of the Gullus gets weaker, so then the fast also gets weaker. It sort of becomes more of an optional thing. The closer we get to the time of Sasin v'Simcha, in other words, the closer we get to the Geula, the less the fast aspect is emphasized, and more the Geula side is emphasized. Says the Rebbe, and this is specifically emphasized and seen in the Chiddush of our generation, and that is, throughout all the previous generations, from the negative things of Shivasar B'Tammuz, from which the negative things of Tisha B'Av also eventually came. Generally, Chodesh Tammuz was always seen as a negative time, as a time the opposite of happiness, a time of Churban and Golus. In our generation, what was revealed in Chodesh Tammuz is also the Simcha and the Geula. It's a month of happiness, a month of Geula. It was the Geula of Kavod Kedushas Meir V'Chami Admur Nesidereinu on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz, which of course their culmination is on the Shabbos of Shivasar B'Tammuz, the Shabbos after Yud Beis Tammuz. And as the words of the Baal HaSimcha V'Agul of the Frierdiker Rebbe in his famous letter, that he said that this wasn't a Geula only for me personally on Yud Beis Tammuz, but also all of those that cherish the Holy Torah, those that keep the mitzvahs. And in fact, Kol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yichuna, even Yidden, that are just called by the name Jew. In other words, it's a Geula for all the Yidden. It's a Geula that's connected to the Geula Amitis V'Ashleimai de Mashiach Tzidkenu. It's all called by the name Geula. All Geulos are connected to each other. And especially that through this Geula, so now started the final stages of completing Yafutzu Meinesecha Chutza, spreading Chassidus even to the lower part of the world, and in a way that from there the well springs of Chassidus are spreading to all parts of the world, which this is the very, very last preparation for the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. So why is it that Dafka in recent times, Tammuz started becoming more of a month of Geula, as opposed to the sad month that it was before? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is because based on all of the simonim and the words of Chazal about the time just before Mashiach comes, our generation is the very last generation of Galus, and therefore, of course, the first generation of Geula. And therefore, when a time of Churban and Galus, starting with Shivasar B'Tammuz, comes, but since we're now so close to the Geula, what's now emphasized mainly is not so much the fact that we need to fix up the negativity of the Galus, rather now what's more focused on, what we see more is the good aspect of it, that it's all a hachana for the Geula HaMitis V'Ashleima. Says the Rebbe, in all of this is added even more through all of the avodah of spreading Torah Yiddishkeit and spreading Chassidus to the outside and the lower part of the world as a result of the Geula of Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz for the past 50 years, that if in the beginning of this Tkufa Kvoit, Kedushas Meir V'Chami Admor Nesidereinu came out with the announcement that Liyalta L'Tshuva, immediately we do Tshuva, immediately the Geula comes, and he testified that we completed all matters of Avodah, and all that needs to be done is polishing the buttons, and furthermore that we finished polishing the buttons already, and we just need to stand ready to greet Mashiach Tzidkenu. So at the end of this period, surely and surely without any doubt, without any shadow of a doubt, that the time of the Geula has come already. And to use the words of Chazal, Kolu Kol HaKitz, in all times and limits are up already. And even the inyan of Tshuva, which the Gemara concludes over there, now it's only dependent on Tshuva. Even Tshuva we had already, B'Shleimus, including also the Shleimus, that kind of Tshuva that it says the Mashiach is going to bring, that even Tzaddikim should do Tshuva. Because every single Yid has a spark of Mashiach inside of him, so therefore this was also accomplished already. And since we're holding so close to the Geula, Amitis V'Ashleima, so now what's felt and emphasized even more than ever is the good, is the positive of Shivasar B'Tammuz in the 3 weeks, that through all of this we come to the Shleimus of the Geula Amitis V'Ashleima. In other words, we see where it's leading to, the good aspect of it, how it brings to the Geula, rather than focusing on the negative aspect of it. Says the Rebbe in Seif Ches. There's even more of a chiddush in our generation itself within this year. And that is, in addition to the fact that we're holding so close to the Gula Mitzvah Shleima, so this year, the year that the Rosh Tevis, that was publicized amongst Yidden, is Hayat Teheshnas, is Teheshnas Nefloi Sarenu, a year in which will be fulfilled the promise of Kimei Tzeis, Chameretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflois, like just in the time of Yitzias Mitzrayim, you will see wonders, and we in fact saw practically already great wonders which testify that this is the year in which Mashiach is revealed in it, and even the very time that Mashiach comes, and he notifies the Yidden and says, "Anovim humble ones, he gives man gulaschem," as the words of the Yalkut Shemoini, and all the way to the announcement that he Nizah Melech HaMashiach, but that Mashiach is about to come. That we get the announcement already that our Mashiach has already come. In other words, we're holding mamish at the threshold of Yemois HaMashiach, the threshold of the beginning of the Gula, and immediately the continuation and the full Gula. And if that's the case, if we're holding so close to the Gula, it is certain that a Shiva Asar B'Tammuz that falls out on Shabbos, and all the 3 weeks of the Bein HaMetzarim of this year, what's emphasized mainly is the inyan of the Geula, and not only a hachana, preparation for the Geula, but that the Geula comes b'poel mamish on this very day of Shabbos Kodesh, even before the 3 weeks start, and b'meilo automatically these days will be transformed to joy and happiness and to Yomim Tovim. Says the Rebbe in Seif Tes. From all of this we understand that standing in the days of Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks of this year, we need to make a special shturim, in an extra special way, in all matters to do with learning in Yoni Geula Mashiach and building of the third Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe explains, it is known and publicized among Yidden for a number of years already about the minig that during the 3 weeks we add in learning Torah in things of the Beis HaBchira, things of the Beis HaMikdash. This is all based on a medrash that says, Bo Yurei, come and see. Look what happens. The Eibishter shows Yecheskel. He shows him the plans and the image, the picture of the Beis HaMikdash. The Eibishter says, Hagid as Beis Yisrael as Habayis, tell them about the Beis HaMikdash, v'yikolmu me'avan Yisayim, let them be embarrassed of their Aveiros, u'modadu as Tachnis, and let them measure the plans of the Beis HaMikdash. That's what the Eibishter says to Yecheskel. So Yecheskel says to the Eibishter, Ribono Shel Olam, the Yidden are in Golus by our enemies. You're telling me to tell the Yidden about the Beis HaMikdash. Are they able to do anything about it? Building the Beis HaMikdash, why don't you just leave them alone until they come up from the Golus? Then I will go and tell them about it. Says the Eibishter to Yecheskel, just because the Yidden are in Golus, is that a reason that my Beis HaMikdash should not be built? When you learn about the inyan of a Beis HaMikdash, it's as great as building the Beis HaMikdash. Go tell them about the Beis HaMikdash. Let them learn all about the Beis HaMikdash. And in the reward and the merit of learning it about the Beis HaMikdash, I will consider it as if they built the Beis HaMikdash. So based on this, the Rebbe says in the last number of years, we had the Hira to learn about the Beis HaMikdash in the 3 weeks. Says the Rebbe, we need some sort of clarification regarding when we need to start learning Hilchos Beis HaBchira, Shiva Asar B'Tammuz falls out on Shabbos, whether Shabbos pushes off all of the ideas of the 3 weeks, and therefore the 3 weeks start off on Sunday in this sort of Kviyas, or do we say that Shabbos only pushes off the fast, and the negative things of Bein HaMetzarim? Says the Rebbe, based on what we said before, that this year specifically, besides for our generation all along, is so much connected to the Gula, but this year specifically we're emphasizing the positive of Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and the Bein HaMetzarim because we're holding at the threshold of the Gula. It comes taken from the Yad Mamish, so it's understood that the learning of Hilchos Beis HaBchira this year has to be in a completely different way. First and foremost, the learning has to be not in the way that we're feeling the Aveilus, the mourning, and trying to fix up the problems of the Churban and the Golos, but rather, even without the Churban, we have the yearning to the great perfection and advantage of the third Beis HaMikdash, regarding which it says, Godly Yibais Acharin Min Arishoin, that is such greatness that never existed before, not in the second Beis HaMikdash, not in the first Beis HaMikdash, not in the Mishkan, that Moshe Rabbeinu made. And B'meila, there was no Churban in it, and it comes in a way of Yisafa and Shleimus over the Mishkan, over the first Beis HaMikdash, over the second Beis HaMikdash. And not only in a way that we're just getting back something that was taken as a deposit or as a security, but rather we're getting something much greater and better than ever existed before. That the learning comes with the knowledge and with the absolute certainty that it's not only what's sometimes referred to as hilchas al mashiach in inverted commas. In other words, as if something that's going to be negeya one day, but rather halacha l'maisa b'poil, that it's mamish, something that's practical in the very next moment, because the Beis Hamikdash that we are waiting for is already standing fully built up above, and immediately it's going to be revealed and come down from Shamayim this very instant. And based on what we spoke about recently, that regarding this special Hisafa addition and learning matters of Torah and Yoni Gula Mashiach, and not only as a Gula in order to hasten and bring Mashiach's coming closer and the Gula closer, but mainly that we should start living in Yoni Mashiach Gula, living with the times of Yemoisa Mashiach. How do we do that? By our mind becoming filled and permeated with the understanding of matters of Mashiach and Geula as they are in Torah. From our seichel, from our intellect, it spreads out and penetrates also the feelings of our heart, and all the way to our actions, machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, our thought, speech, and action, that we act in a way that's in accordance and fitting to such a special time, that we're standing at the threshold of the Geula, a time when we can already point with our fingers and be able to say, Hine zeh melech HaMashiach ba. Says the Rebbe in Sif Yud, V'yesh lahoisif, to clarify more the need of learning Torah in Yadi Gula, Mashiach Gula, and the building of the third Beis Hamikdash as a preparation going into the time of Yemoisa Mashiach. By first prefacing, even though Chazal tell us the Mashiach comes behesach hadas, which means literally it's coming unexpected, but even more literally, the word hesach hadas means when our minds are sort of diverted elsewhere. This is not in contradiction to the fact that we need to think and contemplate in the way of das, as the Alter Rebbe explains, that we really fix our mind strongly thinking about it. Das. That we really think strongly about matters of Mashiach and Gula. And first of all, the thought and the recognition that we're standing mamish at the entrance, the going into Yemoisa Mashiach, Hine zeh ba, because kalu kol hakitz in all times and limits are up already, and we did tshuva already, and we finished all matters of our avodah b'shleimus, as all of the details that were mentioned earlier. So why is this not a contradiction? You're telling me on the one hand we need to think and meditate about Mashiach's coming immediately, and think about Mashiach and learn about Mashiach. Why is that not a contradiction to hesach hadas? Because the word hesach hadas, diverting or going away from knowledge, could also mean higher than knowledge. That means to say that after this penetrates your mind, by thinking and meditating and contemplating about all of this, it now becomes the whole idea of Geula goes even beyond our seichel, beyond our understanding. Says the Rebbe, but practically, notwithstanding the fact that such a big shturim was made about us recently in this year, in the year of Teishnas Nifloi Sarenu, after seeing the miracles and wonders which testify that this is the year in which Mashiach reveals himself, and yet the Rebbe says, we see that it's coming difficult, this whole idea is very difficult to make people really appreciate, and it should really permeate them, this feeling that we're mamash standing at the threshold of Yemoisa Mashiach, that they should start living with Mashiach and Gula. Says the Rebbe, one of the reasons of this is, in addition to the fact that we have our internal golos, is because there's still something missing in the Arenu Neflois. As the Pasuk says, Arenu Neflois, that the Eibush is going to show us wonders, and the Rebbe looks also on the order in the Pasuk. When we say Arenu Neflois, there's a double diuk over here. There's 2 points. First of all, Arenu means that the Eibush is going to show us, directly, not even through a Navi. Second of all, it starts with Arenu, that means right from the beginning, you could see that it's wonders, not that it's first happens wonders and then they have to be pointed out. Arenu Neflois means that the Eibush shows us in the most direct way the greatest wonders. But if it's in a way of Tafshin Nun Aleph, which simply is Niflois Arenu rather than Arenu Niflois, that means first there is Niflois, wondrous things are happening. But then we need to start explaining and pointing out the miracles, meditating, seeing inside of them the Simonim of the Gula, and especially that it wasn't Arenu by the Eibishter himself, that the Eibishter should show everyone the wonders of the Gula, that you wouldn't need any explanations at all, to make us realize that Hine zeh ba, the Mashiach is coming. So therefore, says the Rebbe, because there's still something lacking in this Gilui of the Eibishter showing us directly these wonders, so it's hard to make that the person should really, really feel that Mamash Mashiach is coming. And what's the eitzah to this? Says the Rebbe, the eitzah is, the advice for this is learning Torah in matters of Mashiach and Gula. Because the Torah has the power, Torah being the wisdom of the Eibishter, which is higher than the world. Torah could change the nature of the world, that even if from our feelings, we still feel Chaz v'Shalom somewhat outside of the Gula, because we didn't leave our own internal goals yet, but by learning Torah in matters of Geula, The person is elevated to a state of Geula, and he starts living Geuladik with the knowledge and the recognition that Hine Zebah, that Mashiach is about to come. Says the Rebbe in Sifid Aleph, we could connect this all with the Pirkei Avos of the Shabbos, Perek Shishi. The Mishnah starts off, Shanu Chachamim, the Chachamim learned, B'Shoin HaMishnah, in the language of the Mishnah. And then it says, Baruch Shebachar B'hem, blessed is Hashem that chose them and their Mishnahs. Then it says, Rab Meir says, Kol Oisek B'Torah, someone who learns Torah, is involved in Torah, merits to many things. So the Rebbe asks a number of questions on this Mishnah. First of all, this statement, Shanu Chachamim B'Shoin HaMishnah, simply is as an introduction to the whole Perek. That is, these are actually Baraisas, which are slightly different than Mishnahs, and we are saying that it was said in the style of a Mishnah. So this is an introduction. Shanu Chachamim, they learned in the language of the Mishnah. What did they learn? Rab Meir says, etc., etc. Since the previous parakim were actually Mishnah, they were Mishnayos, so we need to be told that from now it's slightly different, it's called Baraisa. However, since this statement, Shanu Chachamim B'Shoin HaMishnah, is not actually said as a separate statement in a separate section, but rather it's in one Mishnah, in one statement together with what Rab Meir says about the advantages of someone that learns Torah L'Shma, says Rebbe, it makes sense to say that there's a connection between this statement and the following statement of Rab Meir. Furthermore, the Rebbe says we need to understand in each one of the following of these statements. In the words Shanu Chachamim B'Shoin HaMishnah, the question is as follows. Once Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, set up the Mishnayos, Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, which are set up in a number of Masechtas and Prakim and Mishnayos, and Baraisis are clearly a separate division for themselves, usually outside of the Mishnah. Why is it that in this case the Baraisa was put together with the Mishnah in Masechta Avos? And we say that it's a Baraisa, but was learned in the same style as a Mishnah. What is that all about? Another thing we need to understand is what Rab Meir says. Since Rab Meir himself is going to enumerate the various different things to what a person is zoicha, to what a person merits if he learns Torah L'Shma, why does he need to give the introduction? Zoicha l'dvarim harbi is going to merit many things. In fact, this introduction seems to be not in accordance with the style of the Mishnah, which usually is very brief. It seems to be an unnecessary introduction. You're about to say what the many things are. Why the introduction? They are going to merit the many things. Says the Rebbe in Sifyud Beis, we can explain this by saying the following. The word Baraisa actually means outside. These were things that were learned outside the Beis Medrash of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and that's why they're called Baraisa, outside. The Targum actually of the word Chutz is Mibara, from outside. So, what we're saying is these are something that is lower than the level of Mishnayos. They are called chutz, like outside, but at the same time they're still a part of Torah, and they have the whole strength of Torah. In fact, we say that anything that a Talmud Vasik, that a diligent student in the future will be Machadish, is all given to Moshe Rabbeinu. And in fact, that's the whole point that's emphasized in Masechta Avos. The beginning of Masechta Avos starts off with Moshe Kibul Torah Misinai U'Mesara. Moshe Rabbeinu gave it over to Yeshua, etc., all the way to Amidu Talmidim Harbe, to giving it over to many students. Then we should set up many students. And that's the way Pirkei Avos started, how Torah was being passed down. What do we do in the end of Pirkei Avos? We are joining to the Mishnayos, we're also joining the Baraisas, things that were learned outside the Beis Medrash of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. These are the things that include all of those things of Torah that were neschadish, that came about through over those generations. And what do we say before that? We said all of these were learned by the Chachamim in the language of the Mishnah. And as the pasuk says, Kol bonayich limudei Hashem, your children are those that learn the Torah of Hashem. In other words, to show that even these things of Beraisa are really also similar in their quality. They're part of Torah, just like Mishnayos. In a more general way, when we say the word Beraisa, what we really mean is all matters of Torah that are revealed these days, in comparison to the Torah that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. Torah Chadashim Iti Teitze. Those are going to be the secrets of the Torah, the Pnimius of the Torah, which is going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. Chazal tell us that everything that we learn nowadays is hevel, is like nothing compared to the Torah of Mashiach. Nevertheless, of course, the Torah that the person learns nowadays, which is, so to speak, only like the outside or the external, compared to the Torah of Mashiach, Nevertheless, we say, Shanu Chachamim Bil Shoina Mishnah. It is still similar to the Mishnah. That is, that all of Torah is a Torah Achas, and therefore even the external parts of Torah, so to speak, are still one, and similar to the Pnimius Torah that's going to be in Isgala through Mashiach. Says the Rebbe, this is emphasized also what Reb Meir says, the one who learns Torah L'Shma is merits to many things. When we say many things, simply this means not only the things that we're going to enumerate, but it's also a separate statement for itself. He's zoicha to many things. What's the many? Many is bli gvul, the real harbi, the real many is bli gvul. In other words, when a yid learns Torah, what he's zoicha to is the bli gvul, to the Torah that's going to be nizgala. When Mashiach comes, the Torah that comes from the very, very essence of Hashem, who is the true bli gvul. And that is the pshat of kol ha'isik b'Torah L'Shma. Someone who learns Torah L'Shma is zoicha, merits to many things. The message of the Mishnah is that by learning Torah L'Shma in this world, we are zoicha to the bli gvul of Torah Chadashim Iti Teitze, to the bli gvul of the Geula. Says the Rebbe, from this we understand also that even if a person feels himself on the outside, beraisa, which means chutz, the outside, he feels himself far away from the situation and the state of Yemoisa Mashiach, the time when it's going to be the shleimus of the Gilui of Pnimius HaTorah. Nevertheless, by learning Torah, he's zoicha to many things, that he's elevated from the outside, he's brought to the inside. He becomes permeated with Torah, including also permeated with the inyanim of the Geula, and he is prepared for the Izgalus of Torah Chadasha, Me'iti Teitze. So this is again bringing out the same point that the Rebbe was saying before, the dafka through learning Torah, specifically learning Torah in Yana Geula, this elevates us to a Geula state. Says the Rebbe, if you give over Yiratzin v'hu ha'ikar, that we shouldn't have to speak and be moited about thinking and being mizbayin in the matters of Mashiach and Geula, and learning Torah in matters of Mashiach and Geula in the third base of Migdash, because immediately Mamish will see with our eyes of flesh that he needs Melech Mashiach ba. Behold, here is the Geula Mitzvah Shleim and the third base of Migdash, and simply that on the Shabbos Kodesh of Toiv Tammuz, Parshas Bolok, even before we read Parshas Pinchas, at Mincha time, in the year Shnas Elen and Flois will be fulfilled the Nevuah of the Parsha Shavua that we read. V'si Nase Malchus, and that his Malchus, his kingship will be exalted. The Shleimus of the Malchus David. Through Dorach Koichav Miyaakov come Shevet Mi Yisrael, through that star that will step out of Yaakov and the ruler from Yisrael, the Mashiach HaAchar, and Mashiach that redeems the Yidden at the end of Golos, the Geula Nitzchas, the eternal Geula. After which there is no Golos, and in continuation from this we come to all of the details in Parshas Pinchas, which, as we said before, Pinchas is Eliyahu, and as the Gemara says, perhaps Eliyahu came already yesterday to the Beis Din HaGadol to give us the news of the Geula. So we come to the counting of the Yidden, the 10th counting of the Yidden, which we said is hinted in Parshas Pinchas, the counting of the Yidden. The division of the land, which we said is also discussed in Parshas Pinchas. Because we finished already the 42 journeys of the Midbar Amim in the time of Golos, all the way till Yarden Yerechai, and we're going to Eretz Yisrael, to the other side of Yarden Yerechai. Kaidm Mizracha, to the east side, Ume'ever Yarden Marav, as well as the west side, and we divide Eretz Yisrael through a girdle for all of Bnei Yisrael, as explained in detail in the continuation of the parashas of Matis Masei. We also, as it says in Parshas Pinchas about the Karbonis, we go ahead and we bring the Karbonis, both the Karbonis of every day, as well as the Karbonis of Shabbos and Yom Tov, including the days that will be transformed from fasts into Yomim Tovim, in the third Beis HaMikdash, Mikdashad Nekenedi Yadecha, and we learn the new Torah, the Torah Chadashim Iti Teitze, in a way of Eila HaDvarim. This the Rebbe is hinting, of course, to the next parsha after Matis Masi, we have Parshas Dvarim. Eila HaDvarim means we could point with our fingers and say, here it is. A limud, a learning that's coming because we could see the inyanim. When we'll see Alikus, will be seen by Hashem in Tzion, and our eyes will see when the Eibishter returns to Yerushalayim. And as the pasuk says, Ki Elikim Yeshia Tzion, and Yeshvu Yesharim Espanecha, take it for miyad mamash. And just to point out that at the end of this part of the Sikha, they were singing the Nigin on this pasuk, Elikim Yeshia Tzion, etc. And the Rebbe stood up and was dancing b'simcha rabba at his place. May we be zoicha to see that all once again immediately.